afternoon, and welcome to Senior Living Smart webinar series. Thrilled that everybody can join today to talk about this really important topic of, promoting connection and engagement and purpose in senior living. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Hollie Kemp, and she is this Chief Operating Officer from Sagely. And I am Debbie Howard, the co-founder of Senior Living Smart. And so welcome, Hollie.
Hi, Debbie. Thanks for having me.
You're thrilled to have you. And Hollie and I go way back to days when we were both with Emeritus and working together, and we just kind of followed each other throughout the years. And so I think, the fact, Hollie, you can certainly give your background, but, I think being on the operating side and having worked directly at the community level and at the strategic level as well, in the executive positions, just positions you so well to kind of take, a technology solution and really make it so relevant to the industry. So I'd love to hear, just for people who don't know you and are not familiar with your background and with Sagely, just to take a minute and kind of introduce yourself.
Sure. So as Debbie said, I spent most of my career actually on the provider industry side. I started in a caregiver role, and I have kind of done almost every role in between in senior housing. So I've done operations and caregiving, and I've done programming and memory care and strategic roles and community roles, and really am super passionate about the industry, and specifically passionate about memory care and engagement and this whole idea of quality of life through those things, through providing this amazing engagement program. And so when I was working on the provider side, I actually used Sagely in a number of communities with a couple of different providers that I worked for, and really loved and fell in love with the product. And then one thing led to another, and an opportunity came up to join the team. And I thought, this could be a really great opportunity to marry my experience with my passion for reaching even more people with technology and with programs that have measurable outcomes for seniors. And so I joined the team and haven't looked back. It's been a great journey, very busy. What a crazy time to not only change fields and careers, because it was right before COVID that I did that, but no regrets. It's been a really great journey. So.
That's great. Well, it certainly is timely, as I think we've all been struggling with how do we stay connected? How do we continue to live our purpose and find fulfillment in a world that is, very different? And certainly, our residents have felt it, and the staff as well. I think I have way too dependent a relationship on my delivery driver, because every time he drops off a package, I'm like, don't go, we can chat, yeah. You have time. So we're all looking to kind of reconnect, and Zoom and technology can do so much, but it's also what we can actually deliver to the residents, maybe in a different way, and reimagine how we can offer those opportunities. So just for everybody listening, this is going to be just a conversation, so there's not going to be a formal presentation deck. We thought everybody's probably sick of looking at Zoom presentation decks. So feel free to use the questions pane and, put your questions in. If there's anything that you really want to make sure that we cover, any, topic for Hollie, anything that you might be struggling with around engagement and connection, just go ahead and put it in, and we'll make sure to address that. But let's start off just generally, Hollie, really talking about purpose and why we need it, how we find it, how it just gives us that sense of fulfillment, how it impacts health and well-being. Love to hear kind of what you're finding out about the role of purpose today.
Sure. Yeah. So at its, highest level, purpose really is like the meaning of life. It's what gives our life meaning, right? And so when we all have these seasons where I feel like sometimes we know exactly what our purpose is, and then we have these other seasons where we're sort of searching and we're saying, like, what is my purpose? At a more granular level, purpose is really unique. So my purpose and your purpose, they're not always going to be tied, though we might have some commonalities, because purpose is really the ability to use my gifts, my unique talents to help the world or impact people around me, whether it's in my family, my community, wider, across the country. It could be, volunteering at your local church, or something even bigger. It could be, you organize mission trips to deliver, food to individuals who are starving in other countries. It can be, a wide range of things. But the key is that it gives your life meaning, and that it somehow celebrates your unique gifts and talents. And so purpose is often discovered through connectivity. So it's interesting because before we got on, so for those of you who are watching, Debbie and I were chatting about how this year has been, this last 15, 16 months has been really a unique opportunity for all of us, no matter what age you are, right? From children all the way through the aging cycle, we've all really got to experience a little bit of this purpose plummet, or this change in our purpose. And some of that has to do with that connectivity, because when we're around like-minded people or listening to new ideas or new ways of thinking, a lot of times what that can do is activate feelings of interest or wanting to discover or re-energize a purpose that's lived inside of you. And it really can evolve into you being able to figure out what my purpose is and how I'm going to take action toward that purpose. But this year, it's been hard, right? So you talk about your delivery driver. I want to ask my delivery driver to bring me some of my friends. I mean, it's just been, it's been tough, but those friends and those connections, your family, right? They sometimes are helping you to fuel your purpose. And so, I think that's been really interesting. And the other interesting thing around purpose is that I think sometimes we think about it as singular. Like, I have this grand purpose in life. And I think that's one of the things we have to throw away. So when I was thinking about this topic and thinking more about some of the work that I've done and some of the, the research I've done and books that I've read on purpose, I was thinking about this idea that it's not singular. My purpose when I'm 20 might be different than my purpose when I'm 40, which is different than my purpose when I'm 60, and so on and so forth. So we don't have a singular purpose necessarily. Our purpose can evolve and it can change. So the good news about that is that the longer we live, the more opportunity we have to discover and activate our purpose. And so that's one of the things I love about our role in senior housing is maybe someone hadn't yet discovered their purpose, or they hadn't activated it, right? And what you can do in your role as a life enrichment director or memory care director is help to activate or find that and bring a real meaning to people's lives, which I think is very powerful.
Yeah, so that's an interesting concept, because, I think to some degree, maybe people have kind of given up on their purpose, or they feel like that was, when they were younger, or they can't get out and do those things anymore. So how do you recommend that we, engage with residents, maybe in the move-in process or their families, and kind of find out those underlying, purposeful interactions or activations or connectivity that maybe they've had in the past, that when they move into the community, they either can rediscover or they can continue.
Yeah. So that's a great point. And that absolutely happens, where people feel like, well, this season of me being a professional, I've retired, that season's over, or I've raised my family and that season's over. And if that's where you found purpose, it can feel very isolating. It can feel very lonely. Like, I don't have a reason to be here anymore. And I've actually worked with residents who said that, like, I don't have a reason to get up anymore. And it's like, we've got to find a reason. And so I think there's a couple of things that we can do. First is if you are in a mindset as a community, and this isn't necessarily a life enrichment director thing, sometimes it's sales and marketing, sometimes it's life enrichment, sometimes it's the whole team, but throw out this idea of just keeping people busy. Like, that's step one. Because I don't care if you have 15 things on the calendar, if it's not activating purpose and connectivity and relationship and community, we may not actually be doing everything we can to provide, opportunity for quality of life for residents. So that's sort of step one. Step two is really, really deep diving in and knowing who you are. So, you know, I want to know what your goals are, because a lot of times your goals will actually somehow tie to purpose or meaning, right? So
Hmm.
that maybe you move into my community and your goal is you want to be able to pick up your grandbaby when they come and visit. And so we can set a goal of how we work with your, you know, our personal trainer, the physical therapist to get you ready for that, right? Or maybe your
Hmm.
goal is to you want to be able to walk from your apartment down to the dining room, and you don't want to have to use your cane or your walker anymore. And so maybe that's the goal. Or maybe the goal is you want to find a new circle of friends. Maybe you've moved or whatever. So finding that those goals can be, you know, a really good key way. The other thing is really understanding, you know, what brought me meaning before, you know, what's brought me meaning in the past, to your point, because just because my, say, motherhood brought me meaning, so that season isn't over necessarily, but say my like day-to-day work in that is over, right? But there's
Yeah.
something you can still do with those skills and the things that brought you purpose that can reactivate or help you rediscover those feelings. And so you want to try to dig into those things and really provide opportunities. I can't give you purpose. And I was reading a friend's post on this the other day on LinkedIn, and she did a great job, and Anna did a great job of talking about this, but she was saying how sometimes we think like, well, I'll just give you purpose. You can't give me any purpose. Like, you can provide opportunities, you can open up a world for me to discover, to activate, you can promote it, but I have to give me purpose. So your job is to figure out different avenues to help me discover or reactivate what's already inside me, so I can use those unique gifts and talents to impact the world or community or people around me, so that I feel really good about my place in the world.
So back in the day, we all used to use those life story sheets, right? And I think that was step one, right? We're trying to understand people's life history and hobbies and interests and favorite vacation spots and favorite things to eat. And, you know, a lot of the intent was that this was going to be like an interactive experience with the resident and their family members to all participate. And then it ended up getting stuck in the move-in paperwork.
My least favorite thing. Yes.
And we would send it home with them and say, you know, fill out these 10 pages and bring it back with you.
Yeah.
And so it sounds like you're really talking about something that goes way beyond, you know, a survey or a workbook or something that we can just hand to somebody, and that we're magically going to get this back and say, oh, that's it. You know, that's their purpose. It takes a lot more effort, right, to draw this out.
It does. It takes a lot more effort. What the life history or life story can still provide to you is opportunities to create meaningful connection. And through meaningful connection within the community, you could develop relationships. People could discover new interests. They could reactivate their purpose. They could find like-minded people. So all that's still really good and valid and important. But you do have to take it another step, right? So one is, if we're still doing them on paper, which I know a lot of communities are, that can be a real barrier to getting anything good out of those, right? I can remember
Mm-hmm.
days at Emeritus going into communities, and I'd have like stacks of them, like literally stacks, you know, 1,000 pieces of paper that I'd go through, and I'd have my notebook and I would cross-reference. I'm like, okay, so this person was a farmer, and this person was a doctor, and this person likes this, and I would try to find, you know, where there was some synergy between individuals, so then we could create, you know, more opportunity for connection. And that's still good, but I think what you could do now is really leverage technology to help you with that. And I love like, it was one of the things I loved about using Sagely in my past life is I just search it and go, okay, how many veterans do I have? You know, how many
Right.
people do I have who love to volunteer? And so all that information is a little bit more accessible. And then the next step is, okay, so I have that information. Now I've got to dig deeper. And that dig deeper also requires us to take the time to sit with our residents and provide an opportunity to set goals. And maybe for them, maybe some of your residents can articulate, like, here's what gave me purpose and it's missing in my life. And then maybe you can work with that resident to provide those opportunities to reactivate it. I think it's also this shift in, we talked about busy, with busy residents comes really busy life enrichment teams, right? Because you're just running one program after another. And so you don't always have time to sit and do some of these really powerful things. But I think that if we could switch our mindset as a group, as a collective group, because again, it's not always driven by the life enrichment team, and realize that there's more to life than busy, and that purpose may actually be what makes your community special. And it might actually be what makes people want to come and live at your community, is because you take the time to create a life that they've been longing for. And so I think if we can do that and stop and say, okay, so in order to have these conversations and to sit down with a resident and do goal setting and all of that, that means I'm probably not going to have 15 things on the calendar. It's going to be a more curated experience for the residents that live in my community, but that curated experience is actually going to create higher quality of life and better outcomes for those folks living with us.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Because I'm sure some of the life enrichment people are going, oh my goodness, now I've got to set goals with all my residents and find their purpose and run all the events and run around and remind people to come. And there's a million things going on. So connecting residents, it sounds like, certainly leveraging technology so you can very easily search for by profession, or maybe all the people that moved in from out of state, or people who are alumni from the same local college or university, and interest in hobby groups. So that's kind of sounds like it's the first stage. Once you set up some of those groups, and I'm sure that's kind of superficial. It doesn't mean like everybody who went to that same college is going to be best buddies or have that mutual sense of purpose. But I think it's kind of a natural way to begin to introduce residents to each other and begin to have conversations. But have you found that empowering residents to, once these groups are kind of established, that they can kind of take these over and make them really resident directed groups of common, interests or backgrounds or purpose?
Some of the most productive groups I've ever seen, or clubs, or whatever you might term them in your senior living organization, are the ones that are resident led. So you might set up the initial sort of discovery phase, if you will. So you're setting up this opportunity to discover commonality, but then the residents sort of run with it. And I do think that's very powerful for residents who have the cognitive ability to do that. I think it's a wonderful opportunity, because I really own it, and that sense of ownership, and leadership. Like there was one group I loved, had created, the seniors in that community created their own podcast. And so they would run the podcast, and they did like really all of it. And the life enrichment director, all she did was just make sure their room was set up. They had their technology. She was more like their assistant, if you will, but they came up with the topics. The residents led the podcast. They pushed out all the information, and it gave individuals who, had, that history in journalism and had a history in leadership and organizational development, all those things. It gave them this new renewed sense of purpose to use all those skills and then impact not only their community, but the greater community that they were living in. So that's really, that's a very powerful thing. That's very different than me going to see an entertainer, like, which also has value, right? But they're just very different. So I think it's almost like you still need the playfulness, you still need the entertainment, you still need some of those things, right? All of our lives are made up of that in some way, shape, or form. But having that doesn't eliminate the need for more purposeful activities in our life as well.
Well, I feel like it also would empower residents to really create their own culture and create their own community and build their community. Which I think is a lot better. And, what do you think generationally? We're moving out of the go along to get along, generation that we could herd everybody into a room and have everybody do the same thing, and they would sit in that circle and they would do that. Yeah. And, now we have the coffee, the cappuccino and sushi and, generation of have it my way senior living. So do you see that there's going to be more of a pivot from watching, to participating and engaging? Because I feel like a lot of things that are on the calendar is very much just everybody sitting around watching somebody else do something.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's something I was huge on in my leadership role in senior housing, which was I've got to have a reason for being there. I've got to have a role in it. Like just listen, even if it's a lecture series, like what are we going to do with it after? Am I taking notes? Are we as a group going to debrief on it later? You know, you've got to have a purpose, a reason to go, because a lot of the research says even individuals with dementia, there was a study I loved that talked about individuals with cognitive impairment when they were asked about the things that they were participating in the community. They said, I'm sick of people trying to keep me busy. I want to do something that matters, is essentially what they were saying. And I was like, ooh, that's really powerful, right? That it doesn't matter even from a cognitive perspective where you're sitting on the spectrum. What really matters is that everybody is created with this innate need for purpose. And it doesn't change, you know, it might change what provides purpose, but the need for it remains from, you know, childhood through end of life. And so we've, you know, really got to focus more on that versus busy. And I think it takes a collective community or organizational mindset shift to do that, because we are a little stuck in this. If I gave you a calendar as a sales and marketing person and I'm your life enrichment director, and there was, say, you know, 4 or 5 things on there, I can assure you, because it hasn't been that long since I wasn't on the provider side, where people would go, Holly, I cannot sell a community with 4 or 5 activities a day. Like, we need more. You know, so-and-so competitor has 10. I'm like, yeah, but they're all fluff. Like, they're not really, you know, like these are really good ones, you know. And so it does take collective, I think, exhale of, hey, we're going to let go of what it was, and we're going to reimagine and redefine what community life at XYZ Senior Living looks like, because we want to be as unique in our offering as the people who live here. And when we take that approach, it changes a lot of things, and it changes, I think, even our pride in how we're selling programming. So it's just an undoing of what we know, which can be hard when you've done it for a long time. And I mean, I'll be the first to say, when I first started in senior housing, I definitely had we'll just move from one activity to the next. You know, I was working in adult day, and, you know, my residents would come in, and I had this sort of designated amount of time to work with them. And I'd be like, okay, you know, we're going to do coffee and news, and then we're going to do this, and then we got lunch, and we would just go from one thing to the next. But I wouldn't say that we created a lot of meaning. You know, it took me really years of continuing to grow from an education standpoint and an experience standpoint to really know how to do it a little bit better.
Okay, great. Well, we have some questions, so let's talk about this a little bit. We had a request to talk more about Sagely in my past life. You know, are these apps, and maybe give us a little bit of an overview, you know, into the features, functions, capabilities, and really how to kind of use technology to complement, you know, the high touch part that we're really comfortable with.
Yeah. So in past life, I'm talking about, I worked as a vice president of life enrichment. My title was resident experience, which just meant memory care and life enrichment. And then as a chief experience officer in my 2 last roles where I used Sagely, chief experience officer for a company where I also oversaw both memory care and the resident experience. And so when I was in those roles, we were trying to do what I'm talking about now. We were really trying to say, okay, we're going to throw away the 9 or 12 programs a day, and we're going to hyper focus in on doing things that we know make a difference. But then we got to this point, so my team and I would have these discussions, and life enrichment team and memory care team would say, but then, like, how do we know that it's working, right? So how do you know? I mean, you can tell by smiles or faces or whatever, but there's got to be like a more measurable way. And then the other obvious thing that would come up is how, like, where's the time? How am I going to do that? There's only 1 of me, or there's 2 of me, and I've got X amount of residents. And it became like, okay, we've got to think of a better solution. And so I started to seek technology solutions, because I said, there's got to be efficiencies. We can at least find efficiencies. And if I can give you back 2 hours a day, then that's 2 more hours you could spend doing this stuff, right? And then
Yes.
also, I could be able to visualize as their support person what they were working on and say, hey, maybe tweak this, or have you thought about this? And I could do that for the 195 properties I was supporting if it was cloud-based versus sending me an email with the attachment or the calendar, and just the inefficiency of that was just crazy. So I found Sagely, and Sagely really provided me this opportunity to say, okay, we're all going to be in this platform, so I can see what's happening. We can set standards around what we're going to do, and you can also start to measure not only with how people are attending, but how they feel, like what's their mood when they're at the program. How active are they? So it's not just attendance, but it's like, how engaged am I? And then I could also layer in some wellness assessments. So, if I was doing a physical fitness program and I wanted to see my actual impact on, somebody's balance, for example, I could layer in assessments. And so Sagely provides all the tools in one spot. So there's apps, there's the web-based platform where you'll build your calendar and newsletter. There's the in-room TV channel. There's, your TV digital signage. There's the wellness component, the attendance component. But the great thing is it's sort of this single point of entry for a lot of different things. So once I put the resident's information in, for example, and I'm collecting all that, life story and all that great information about who you are, I can start to see, okay, this many people are veterans, or this, I can see that commonality we talked about. And then the other piece that I loved is I could also see what's working and what's not. Here are my top 10 most attended, active, programs, and these are the ones that I schedule that nobody likes, like nobody comes to, and they're not active, and then that helps me to be more efficient and more effective in my offering. And so that's how I started to use Sagely, and then really started to look at, okay, so now I have all this information, and now I want to look at trends and the impact I have on someone's overall well-being when I'm doing more of this. And so Sagely just lets you do that all in one spot, and it helps you to be more efficient, so you get a little bit more time back with the seniors that you're working with.
So I would think it would have been so important during COVID for families to have a view into what was happening, because they were probably thinking, is mom sitting in her room all day doing nothing? So there's also a family component that they can also get a sense of what's going on and how much their loved one is participating.
Yes, so I'm glad you said that, 'cause that was actually another really big reason I had chosen Sagely on the provider side. This particularly for me was at the time in memory care, but during COVID, it was all levels of care. At the time that I chose Sagely on the provider side, it was all about communicating on a regular basis all the wonderful things that we did with our residents, specifically in memory care, because what families would hear, what they would see was, well, they didn't give me lunch today, or I didn't do anything today, and a lot of that was because the questions being asked were relying on short-term memory, which the resident didn't have access to. So the answers would vary, and typically were fairly inaccurate. And so being able to send a picture and an update and create this sense of connectivity with the community and this feeling of, okay, I made the right decision was super important. Now, during COVID, it went from that being really important in memory care to that being really important everywhere. And so I actually got the privilege of seeing some of the feedback from people who did this really well. And I can tell you those families will not move their loved one out of those communities ever. Like, they were so thankful to see their mom, to see their dad, to see that the person was still living. I think that was the biggest, not living, like living their life. I had one with gardening where the community had taken the resident outside and she was working in her garden, and the family had sent a note back and just said, you don't even know what it means to me to see this, and to see mom in the garden, that's like her favorite thing to do. Or another one where a resident, it was an uncle, had moved into a community and he had been, pretty lonely at home, and they saw him and they were like, I can't believe he's, participating in XY thing. Good for him. They were just so enthusiastic. So yeah, it provides that connection to the outside world, even if you're in a quarantine or, isolation phase in your community. So that was really amazing as well.
Yeah, because I don't think the images that the media was showing had all of those uplifting representations. So I think it's great for families to say, well, here, life goes on and there's still joy and there's still engagement and there's still a lot happening. We had a question about Sagely TV. You mentioned kind of Sagely TV, and I think a lot of folks are trying to figure out how to bring programming, to the residents, maybe in times when either to supplement, the programming, or in times that we just have to either stop the group activities or limit them, and we still want to allow people to be able to participate. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that and the difference between like organizing maybe an event through Sagely TV versus trying to get a bunch of people on Zoom to participate.
Yeah, so Sagely TV provides the opportunity for a dedicated channel on the residents' TV. So it just makes it really simple. So they go to channel 2, it's always channel 2, and you could have a live stream of your fitness class if your program director is teaching it down in the fitness room, but you're not bringing residents down. You could live stream that to channel 2. For the residents, it's seamless. I just turn on channel 2 and there's the fitness class, or I turn it on and there's the craft class. Or you could just have something that plays continuously, updates with pictures and the menu and all of those kinds of things. You could also do DVDs, you can live stream, you can have your ongoing kind of feed of the weather and whatever you want to deliver for messaging in the community. The great thing about it is, like you said, Debbie, it can be a supplement to your programming. Maybe you have residents who aren't necessarily big group joiners, but they would actually do the fitness program in their apartment if they had access to it. So you could keep it all the time, like you could dual broadcast, if you will, live and then on that channel. So it's great for that. And then of course it's really wonderful if you do get into a situation where you are completely quarantined to your rooms and you can't go out. So, but for the resident, it's as simple as turning the channel to that, whatever community channel you have. So I think that's a really great feature to have in your communities, just ongoing, even outside.
Yeah, I think to some degree, a lot of these innovations, if you will, or accelerations are going to stick, right? And maybe at the end of the day, we're going to, open it up to more residents, by offering that kind of hybrid model, because almost every community that I've worked in had this small group of like super socials, right? And they just went to absolutely everything. And so the resident care director got to know them really well and really kind of based the program around that small group, because they were engaged, and that makes sense. Let me give them more of what they want. But I think this is going to really allow more people who are not those super joiners or super socials to still really, really benefit. But I would also think that with Sagely, if you're measuring like people who maybe are coming to events and those that aren't, that have a low participation, that you would be able to more easily maybe identify and have maybe more one-on-one, or maybe schedule it as part of their care plan, that they have a certain amount of one-on-one interaction with somebody on the team. Doesn't have to be with the activity director, but they're just not going to be that super social or larger group joiner.
Absolutely. And we actually have something called our insights dashboard, and you can see people who aren't attending, people who are, and then people who significantly change. So that's also another really good data point. So if you're in that core 20 people who come to everything, and all of a sudden you're not, it can be just a red flag, or maybe we can be more proactive in making sure that we're figuring out why and addressing your engagement needs so that it doesn't lead to further issues with your emotional or mental health. So yeah, absolutely. It can be super helpful for being able to really measure where each resident is and then tailor your program. Those joiners are really important. But for some people, that large group is just a really intimidating place to be.
Mm-hmm.
So even if it's not one-on-one, you could have 2 tracks or 2 different, you could have one track that's maybe like a smaller group, and even limit. So one of the things I love about Sagely too is you can limit the number of people who can attend, and it can show like there's a 5-person registration limit, for example, on the app.
Mm-hmm.
If I go to register and 5 people are already registered, I can't. And I think that is actually another feature that should be used ongoing, is limiting the number of people in a group, because unless it's entertainment or something like that, to really engage more than 10 people and is very difficult. But 5, imagine if you brought it down to 5. I know a lot of residents who would have been way more comfortable in a group of 5 than a group of 20. And especially if you talk about discovering something new or trying something new. I don't know about you, but I don't want to go to the gym when I'm not fit. That's like the worst time.
Right.
But is when I need it the most. But if I haven't been exercising, I don't want to go to the gym around all these people who are watching me. But if I knew it was only going to be, like if I went and there was me and like 3 other people and they too were in the same category as me, I'd feel a little better. So this is something else that I think is important, and it's just something to consider for the life enrichment directors on the call. Is so just before I had moved over to the Sagely side, we had started identifying if a class or a program was a beginner, a novice, or an expert level. And the reason that we did this is throughout my career, I've had both ends of the spectrum feedback from residents. Everything's too hard and I can't do it, or everything's too easy and it's almost insulting to me. And I thought, there's got to be a better way, because we program to extremes. It's hard to program in the middle. But if you start to create your calendar or a catalog or your newsletter and you identify this is a beginner class and this is what beginner means, you could actually open up people's minds to trying something they've never tried before. Because I'm not an artist. So if you said that it was an expert, oil painting class, I'm not signing up for that, because it's going to be not fun. But if it was a beginner class and I knew everybody else in the class was going to be beginner, then I might attend. So that's another little trick I think that's really helpful in starting to open up to reach more people, is identifying the level of interest or expertise that you need to be a part of a particular program.
Yeah, I love the idea of creating your programming around not only the kind of the themes and topics. People are always trying to do those 7 things of wellness, right? Try to hit all of those, but also just trying to figure out, identifying what size group is going to be most successful, and probably have to play around with that a little bit, right? You probably have to, as you're figuring out your calendar, kind of figure out what those numbers look like, and then offering the different levels so that people can identify and be successful. Because nothing worse than you finally get someone who comes to an event that they think they're going to like, and they have a bad experience. So and how much do you see going on around kind of that social interaction of, let me see who else is coming to this event? Are all my friends going to be there? Or I sure hope that Debbie's not there because I don't like her. Do you see that people actually look at the attendance list and as part of their decision making?
So in the club, like when you're talking about clubs and like these things like ongoing series programs, definitely. I actually had a memory care director who reached out to me week before last that I had worked with and had created a program for this company. And she reached out to me and said, the residents love this class so much. And she said, and they keep coming and we don't even have to invite them. And it's a series and they've come to every single class in the series. And it was a 6-part series. And these were residents who had cognitive impairment, but they liked the other people they were working with and they really liked the class. So they kept coming. And so that's another thing to consider, Debbie, is where you create relationship is not typically a single interaction. So I'm a big fan of series style programming where we pick a topic and we sort of dive deep into it. So if I'm going to do a photography series, we're going to learn the history of photography. We're going to learn about different mediums within photography. We're going to actually take photographs. We might even, develop them, frame them, whatever, but we're going to have classes. And that way people with the common interest, they get this 6 weeks to develop a relationship. That's where I see things start to happen, where friendships are made. And then I might, Debbie, I see there's another class coming up. It's the woodworking class. Do you want to try it with me? Because again, we're more open to try things typically with a friend or, someone else that we're comfortable with than we are on our own. So having those can also really help, and it can create a little bit more interest in your calendar as well, and a commitment to coming to something over and over. And it also goes away from being busy, and it may actually teach a new skill or develop a new
Right.
passion or activate, that purpose. Or when you're doing a series too, you might be able to identify someone who was a photographer and bring them in,
Mm-hmm.
let them help teach the class or let them run the whole thing. So I think that's another way to look at programming that's a little bit different, but I think it's really valuable, and it also
Mm-hmm.
creates a sense of commitment. And in some ways, commitment can activate the idea of purpose, in that I feel like I have a reason to go to or be a part of, because people in that community are now depending on me. They're going to look for me. Why am I not there? Why isn't Hollie here? She's been to the other 3 classes. So that's another way to really think about it. And you brought up something I want to mention about the dimensions of wellness, which I still feel are very valid. There's a lot of research around them. They are valid. But
Yeah.
what often is missed or not talked about is that you need something different than I do from those dimensions. And that's where you get into what that sort of personalization or curated programming. Because for you, social might be like, I need 5 or more social activities a week. Like, I'm super social and I need that. And for me, maybe what I need is a lot of physical activity. So if you only have one physical activity that I like, you may miss the boat for me. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's where really getting to know, and then you could drill it down even farther, right? So for me, physical activity might be more independent or small group. And for you, it might be a larger group. And so that's where really spending time to set goals and understand who your residents are can help you to really create a better overall program for them.
So does Sagely kind of help with that process of offering surveys about the types of activities, and then how often, and then in what size group, or we're planning our second quarter calendar. Here are some ideas we want to throw out, to see how people react and respond to them before launching an 8-part series on something that nobody really is interested in.
So we are actually in the midst of an enhancement that does some of that, yes. And that has to actually do with really changing how the lifestyle profile works. So it's not just about collecting your past or your past story, but also collecting, what am I interested in right now? What might I want to learn? What type of person am I? Like, how would I describe myself? And giving the resident, the family, and the community the opportunity to contribute via technology. So that's something that we're going to be launching in the next couple of months. So where a resident will actually be able to go into their app and tell their own story and say, these are the things I want to do, and this is a current interest or a past interest, or maybe I just want to try it. And so we're starting to create some of that stuff, because I feel like that's really critical in trying to continue to enhance the resident experience in our communities.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the last thing I just want to touch on, because I know we're coming up against our end, unfortunately, because I've enjoyed every minute of this, is really just about building on strengths. I had an interview with one of our clients who actually uses Sagely, and it was funny because I was not talking to them about Sagely. I was talking to them about, why did you choose this community, and what about it has made it a successful experience from you? And so Sagely kept coming up in the conversation, and I was like, okay, I gotta find out more about this. But one of the things that I'll never forget, one of the adult children said to me is, when I had to move my mom to memory care, right? Because in COVID, she was just laying on the sofa, even though she was with her husband, her days had no purpose. There was really no way to engage her, and so they made the decision to make that move into memory care. And she said, I went over and I told the director, here are all the things mom can't do. She can't do this anymore, can't do that anymore, is never going to do this. She's, all of this stuff. And finally, she just stopped and she said, you know what? You've told me all the things that your mom can't do. It's going to be our job to show you all the things that she can do.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, and it was just a turning point for that family member. It just kind of stopped her in her tracks. And I think about, residents that maybe, we never lose that sense of identity, even if we're no longer actively doing those things. So, like Andrea's mom, she was an amazing Italian cook. I mean, her identity, she was a cook and she was a hostess and she had parties and she was an entertainer. And, she did all that. Well, she's had macular degeneration for like 20 years, right? But her identity hasn't changed. She is still in her mind a cook, a hostess, a party goer. And she's still, even though she can't maybe cut and chop and cook and do all those things because she can't see well enough, she would get so much joy about talking about recipes and engaging and talking to the chef and going to those demos or sharing her stories and her recipes and having somebody else make it with her. I mean, I just feel like there's so much, opportunity to get into those identity questions. My mom's not a French teacher now, but probably if you ask her, who are you? She'd be like, I'm a French teacher. Well, hasn't taught in 40 years, but
Yeah.
she could get a lot of joy out of, participating in French and teaching and learning and still engaging, because that identity doesn't really change. So you just talk about that for a minute, and then I have one poll question at the end.
Especially in relation to memory loss or physical change. Like, I love that story of Andrea's mom, and that's exactly what it's about. It's identifying, this is my identity, and then saying, how can I still provide you purpose or opportunity for that purpose with that identity? So what you were just talking about is ID, right? So if a resident, is what was, I'm going to say is a chef because that's their identity, right? So she was an Italian chef and a hostess. So what you can do is then say, okay, so what strengths does the resident or capabilities still have? So look through the lens of what's there, not what's lost. And if you know what's there, then you can figure out how to use it to promote feelings of purpose, right? And so if the person can still speak, ask them for their instructions. What would you do to make the dough rise correctly when I'm baking this bread? Or can you show me, like, how did you knead the dough? And just those little things of, I need your help, can make you feel like I'm the teacher, I'm in charge, I'm using my skills. And so it's framing the opportunity around the residents' strengths and capabilities instead of around their limitations. And I think we fall into that sometimes. And it's hard, especially for a family member, not to see the losses. But what I would encourage folks who are in the industry working with residents to do is really focus on possibilities and potential and forget about limitations and what someone cannot do. Like, throw that out of your mind, because there's so much that's still there. A 10-page life story doesn't begin to tell you how many strengths I have, how many things I'm capable of doing. So if you can focus on that, it really will change your interactions. And that one thing that person said to her mom or to her daughter, I would pick her every day of the week. I want to hire her. I don't even run memory.
Yeah. Yep, she is wonderful.
Should look at it. So I love that. Debbie, can I give just a couple quick tips that I wanted to make?
Yes, definitely.
I know we might be running over, but just a couple quick things that are kind of tangible for the folks on the takeaway. So the first one is to challenge yourself to explore. So break away from your norm, because sometimes the best way to find our purpose is to experience new things. So we may not even know that we have a talent or that we have this unique gift, but when we explore, we may find it, we may identify it. Stop thinking that you can give your residents purpose. Like, you can't. So you've got to put opportunities in place where they discover it, and then you can help them, to continue to fuel it. Fuel curiosity through engagement. This can lead to purpose. Know and encourage the telling of people's story. There's so much good stuff in the story. So not just for the purpose of engagement, but I can find purpose in using my story to help you. And so many of us go through trials, tribulations, right? I was telling my story yesterday about mental health on a podcast, and that really provided purpose to that pain. And so sometimes our story provides this opportunity to impact others and to help people with what we've experienced. So give the residents the opportunity or the forum or the stage to do that. foster attitudes of gratitude. So I was telling Debbie before we got on that there's amazing research around how feelings of awe and gratitude can actually help to set an emotional foundation for purpose. So try to encourage that in your residents. And then the last thing, when I was researching about purpose and thinking more about this particular talk, I love this quote, and so I just want to share it. And it says, "The mystery of human existence lies not in staying alive, but in finding something to live for."
Perfect. That is great. I appreciate those tips. Those are great. Now, before we sign off, I'm just going to do a quick poll just to ask folks that are on the call if you would like to have a demo. Just let us know. You can check yes, please, or not right now. Just giving people an opportunity that if you want more granular information. I know I had a question about, does Sagely TV interact with basic cable? And there's a lot of more tangible questions. But if you'd like a demo, certainly let us know. If not, that's fine too. And we will be sending out a recording. So if you want to share this with, other team members, and so we will be following up with some additional information. So Hollie, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate your time today. And thank you everybody for joining, and let's go out and create purpose and connectivity and engagement. So thanks for all that you do to help our residents find that in your communities. You're all superheroes. Thanks so much.